give you a little view of the Alamo Dome, downtown San Antonio. It's pretty. I'll try and walk up here in Miller's restaurant. It's a parking lot right across from the Alamo Dome. And I usually like to, it's easier to park there for me. I don't know if you can hear me. But look at the nice view. That's the, they call it Space View. And I'll make a few comments at your Alamo Dome right there. Of course, then we get off for the Alamo. Oh, I might have missed my exit. If I did, I would go. Oh, I got it. It's a nice view. And then, I'm hoping you can see it. And that's your Alamo Dome. Okay. And I'm going to try and park right in this parking lot. Oh, there's a couple cops there on the phone. Okay, let me see if I could go in here. I can park right here. Okay, I'm going to get out and cover a few things. I was going to teach Kings. I was going to teach Kings and Zechariah, but let me just walk this way a little bit. I left my car open. I don't think there's anything to steal. But instead, I'll save Kings chapter 5 and Zechariah 5 and 6. I'll teach that tomorrow. I would have got up here earlier, but I actually did some work at the house. Actually, sky needed, space needed, whatever they call it. A few just little news updates, and then I'll share a couple of scriptures. Okay, we'll teach one of these. All of these, when I do, like, daily rollout, I'll just title it for this day. That way, if there's any like news that I catch before the end of the day, today is not a whole lot of news. North Korea is indeed doing live fire exercises, but they didn't do one of their other nuclear tests, nor did they shoot one of their rockets, which are the big things that the UN has like sanctions for them not to do. So they're kind of, North Korea's kind of somewhat toned down, and the U.S. has a nuclear, I believe, nuclear sub, plus Trump said the Armada right off of the area. And Ivanka Trump today is in Berlin, and she was booed. She talked about, you know, her dad is not really against women's rights. Now they booed her openly, and the media sort of like was good thing. You know, if Chelsea Clinton ever spoke, or if President Obama's former president, if his daughters ever spoke, they were not old enough. And I do understand Ivanka's part of the Trump White House, but still, the media would not rejoice that she got booed. The other little thing, and then I'll do a few notes on Kings and Zechariah. Fake news. I just heard on the news that Google is going to try to steer people away. If you Google for a news story, they're going to try and steer people away from fake news. And some of that means if it's like a conservative view, they're going to steer you to another side. The media the last few days, this is what I call fake news as well. The media now made a very big thing out of Trump's first 100 days. Now, 100 days of any president in office is normally like a benchmark. It's not it's just something that how much did you accomplish? Well, then the news the last few days said Trump, his 100-day mark is coming, but he didn't do a few things. He did some things, he didn't do others. And then Trump made a statement. He said it's not really such a big thing. Well, the news, the main world news, ABC, NBC, CBS, they went back and found any statements from Trump where he said a 100-day benchmark is important. Then they also went and found Republican campaign things from others, not from Trump, and that they were raising money in the past for their campaigns or whatever, or recently, and they said, help us, support the first 100-day agenda of Trump, hopefully get things in. But the news did a very in-depth. They went back and found any statements, and so they wasted maybe 15 minutes of a 30-minute world news, supposedly, to just show, let's find any statements. You could have done that just with anybody. They showed the ratings of President Obama. In his first 100 days, his ratings were like 60-something%, just the polls of what people felt he was doing. Bill Clinton actually had lower ratings than President Trump, though the media is normally not going to tell you that, for his first 100 days. And why did President Obama get like 60-something%? Because there was great excitement in our country that the first black president was elected, which I too was excited about. If you remember, they gave the Nobel Peace Prize to President Obama before he did anything. And then there was some criticism like, well, how did you give him the Nobel Peace Prize? And for the first time in the history of the Nobel Peace Prize, they said, well, we didn't base it on what he did. We based it on any future things that he might do. So the reason President Obama got such a high rating, which I'm not against, in his first 100 days, is because there was an excitement in the country. And I too was excited. So that's fake news. Now a few comments on Kings, which I was going to teach. But when we do Kings chapter 5, we're going to see Solomon in his wisdom. There's two verses I'll hit on real quick. It says, Solomon now, he makes a league with Hiram the king of Tyre. And Hiram the king of Tyre, another king in the day, Tyre and Sidon, Jesus quotes in the New Testament, same region. And Hiram has access to trees and trees of Lebanon and cedar and all these things that King Solomon is going to need to build the temple. He's going to build the first temple, which we refer to as Solomon's temple. As I comment on Zechariah and these other later books, that's actually the second temple, because the first one is going to get destroyed. And in the days of Jesus, we refer to that as Herod's temple. It's actually still Solomon's temple, but King Herod, of the days of Christ, built it, elaborate structure. So these are the temples in Scripture. But Solomon does something wise, and he makes this league where he's going to get all the wood and the precious stones and the cutters of stones. But Hiram says to Solomon, it says in Kings 5 that Hiram was a lover of David, King David, which was Solomon's father. And so he was glad that God established such a wise son over the throne. And Solomon says, as you know, in the days of my father David, he wanted to build the temple, and he made preparations for it, but because he had constant war, he was always fighting and battling. He was a worshiper of God, David. He praised God in many of the Psalms, we read this, but yet at the same time, he's fighting all the time. And so he was unable to accomplish building the temple. So it passes to his son. And there's another verse in Kings 5 that says, but God gave Solomon peace. He gave him peace from all these wars. And he blessed Solomon and established him. So he was able to do it. And as I read that the other day, getting ready to teach it, I thought I'd kind of try to mark the verses that, I'll devotionally read. And it was interesting because I liked the one about Solomon that said God gave him peace and rest from all the years. And he was at peace. But I thought I actually identify more with his father in the sense of that he felt like he was actually always at war, which he was. And either way, that stuck with me. That whenever you're going to do work in the kingdom, there's always going to be things that you do. At least that's my experience. And the few verses, the few chapters in Zechariah that I wanted to hit on, which was Zechariah, it's a nice view there, Zechariah 5 and 6. I'll still teach this whole thing tomorrow. But there's visions that Zechariah sees and instructions he gets. And I'll just give you a little teaser. Read those two chapters. In the beginning of chapter 5 of Zechariah, in preparation for the teaching video that comes out in a few days. Zechariah sees a flying, the King James says, a flying roll or a flying scroll. And it's this banner, just picture like a scroll that you would open up like a banner, flying. And it's written, there are words on both sides of it. And some Bible teachers used to teach Zechariah saw a UFO. It's really a type of the law of God, because it says this scroll enters into every house. And those who steal and those who bear false witness, those are the only two, commandment number 3, Commandment number 3, 10 Commandments number 8. Those are the only two that are mentioned. I found that interesting. It says it'll go in and it'll bring judgment. So what he sees is a type of the law. That's what he sees. The law of God, it talks about it brings a curse. But Paul, if you remember in my teaching, refers to Deuteronomy and talks about the curse of the law. For it is written, cursed is everyone that does not continue therein. So this is simply a type of the law. The law of God is going to make sure justice is accomplished. And then I won't give you too much more on that. And then in Zechariah 6, we really see a significant type of picture. Because Joshua the high priest, who I mentioned already in Zechariah chapter 3 earlier, previous day, he was crowned with, there was a turban put on Joshua's head. It says, King James says fair mitre, but that was like a hat for a priest. And that was talking about the restoration of the priesthood. But now in chapter 6, Zechariah is told, go take some men from the captivity. And they were going to take gold and silver and make crowns. They were going to crown Joshua. So not only did Joshua have the priestly hat, but now he gets the governor type, the king type rule, which is a type of Christ. And there's a famous verse that says, the man whose name is the branch, Zechariah 6, he will grow or branch out from his place and build the temple of the Lord. Okay? So now what we see in that act of Zechariah 6 is Joshua, the high priest Joshua, not the Joshua of the conquering the promised land, the protege, if you will, of Moses, but this is the high priest Joshua, and we see him as a type of Christ, because Jesus is both priest and king and also prophet. And it's interesting because those that are familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls was a find, a great archaeological find, but that came from what we refer to as the Qumran community, a particular type of Jewish sect that kind of like isolated themselves and went out, and this is how they lived. This is even before the time of Christ, but they existed at the time of Christ. But the Qumran community, their reading of the Old Testament, they were actually looking for two messiahs to come. Now they were wrong, but the reason they had that belief is they realized in the Old Testament prophets there was coming a deliverer that would be a priest, and then also one through these prophecies that would be a king. So they were kind of looking, they were wrong, but they were looking for both a messianic priest and some type of a king to come. But they were mistaken because both of those roles were fulfilled in Christ, priest and king. So I'll throw those two out. I'm going to also teach Mark chapter 8 is coming up. I already taught it. Read Mark 8 and I'll just give you a few things to look for. Notice how Jesus interacts with the disciples about the feeding of the multitudes. We read in Mark 6 that he fed the multitudes miraculously with 5 loaves of bread and a few fish. And then notice in Mark 8, there's another occasion where there's a whole bunch of people gathered around. They follow the ministry of Jesus. And he asks them, what are we going to do now? We got all these people out here, we have nothing to feed them. Much like their previous experience when they had a lot of people and not enough food. And look at the response. I won't teach it all now. And notice why Jesus later in that chapter gets upset with them. Okay? That's coming up. And also look at the end of the chapter where you get the great confession of Peter. I teach this, it's coming up. But look at the response of Peter when he says, Jesus asks, who am I? Peter gives the confession, you're the Christ. Then Jesus says, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, I'm going to be crucified, and I'm going to rise again. Peter says, no, far be it from us to let that happen. Jesus rebukes Peter. Get thee behind me, Satan. And then, at the end of the chapter, it's a common teaching where Jesus says, if you're going to come after me, you got to bear your cross. You got to be willing to die. And he says, what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Now, I teach that in an upcoming video, Mark 8, but in preparation for those, because today I'll do, if anything else comes up, I'll do another one. But look at those, kind of follow those. On Facebook, I do not do a lot of interaction. I upload these. But I don't do a lot of interaction because, just for various reasons. But every now and then I'll just see things and I'll kind of pray about them. But I noticed that there's somebody that's a Christian brother, but maybe he's having some struggles because he's posting a lot of things. But one of the things I did read that he posted, why he's very disillusioned right now. He said, because Christians always, the ones he knew, they're always cheating and stealing. Those are the two actual sins that we read about in Zechariah. The two things that upset the judgment was coming was because they were bearing false witness, they were stealing. Those are the two. I found that interesting. So even God is upset with those issues particularly. So I figured I would just mention that. Many years ago, when I was in Kingsville, and I did the little home church, I won't go too long, but I noticed in the home church, one year...
He told me to park at.
With these bus drivers, I thought maybe I'm in this spot. But one year I had kind of backslid, went out and drank, and this was maybe 1991. So it was a bad year. I was at clubs, drinking. And there was somebody that was somewhat of a Christian friend. I've mentioned him before, but he was also involved in the occult. I won't do the whole story again. But when I kind of backslid, one night I was with him. Not really partying, but he was there at some house. And he was kind of happy. But I remember he said, John, I want you to just deny God. And I was backslidden, you know. He says, but I want you to say with your mouth, I deny God, I deny Jesus. And I remember, though I was sinning and backsliding and all, I said, no, I could never do that. I said, I could never do that. So that's important when you're disillusioned in ministry. It's always a danger zone when you begin to actually deny God. Oh, I see, there's a little carnival. I always like seeing carnivals. There's one right in the back, right over there. So this is the day that the Lord has made, and you rejoice and be glad in it. This might be the last little upload for today. I'll write some notes, and tonight I'll post the whole thing. But so we'll end with that for right now. And I hope you got a nice feeling, okay? I know I look crazy.